Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Resident coffee expert Dr. Coffee is back on the line. How you doing, Dr. Stephen Helschein?
Hey, it's Dr. Coffee here, and it's another day above ground living the dream.
Yeah, my friend, that's what I love to hear. Interesting things going on in the coffee world. A victory for healthy coffee, if you will, today. Some interesting stuff with the state of California and Prop 65. Did you see this about the acrylamide here, Dr. Steve?
Of course, I've been following this since the judge ruled in favor of saying, so let me make sure everybody understands. California has this rule. It's called Prop 65. And anything that has cancer-causing abilities, according to Prop 65, has to be with a warning label saying that it causes cancer or may cause cancer, or may lead to cancer.
Mm-hmm.
California has this strict rule. And about a year or two ago, a judge came out and said, based upon what he's seen and based upon the fact that there are a bunch of advocates for putting a warning label on coffee, he declared that coffee fits into Prop 65.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, Dr. Coffee, along with a whole bunch of other people, have been writing letters and have been working on changing the regulations that would require cancer warning labels to be tossed out.
Mm-hmm.
We felt that this was a ruling by a judge who did not really understand what he was ruling at the time. And I hate to parody our president, Trump, but boy, this is what we really call fake news. If there's anything that's going to be fake news,
it's that coffee causes cancer.
Coffee causes cancer is fake news.
Right. Well, let's get down to it then, because it all revolves around this compound called acrylamide. Talk about acrylamide a little bit. The studies that were done on acrylamide. I believe there was a study that was done on rats where they loaded them up with it really high and it caused cancer. So now we kind of have it on our radar as a carcinogen. Is that the case?
Yeah. So acrylamide is a chemical compound that's found in lots of foods and beverages. French fries, roasted nuts, even prune juice has acrylamide in it. The Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has been conducting research on acrylamide consumption, and it says that the substance has been shown to cause cancer in animals, and that they felt that it needed to be looked at whether or not coffee, which has acrylamides in it, especially based upon the roasting time,
Mm-hmm.
should be labeled as carcinogenic. And the FDA was inconclusive about that. They did studies showing that if you gave rats large amounts of acrylamides, large amounts, that it would lead to tumor formation. But, I don't know if you know the toxicity level of just coffee alone in people in the United States.
Right.
But you'd have to drink 100 cups of coffee in a day, caffeinated coffee, for coffee to be toxic. And the amount of acrylamide in 1 cup of coffee is inconsequential. You would really have to burn every batch that you roast in coffee to have enough acrylamides
To have any effect.
to have any effects.
Right. Imagine having 100 servings of French fries. You'd probably keel over on the spot. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. I had a patient call up last week, and they said, "What are essential fatty acids? Essential oils?" We sell a product or recommend a product called Parent Essential Oils, which is essential oils that are used by every cell in the body. And they're essential, meaning we don't make them. And so she called me up and said she was having an argument with her husband about what essential oils are. And she said, according to your website, Dr. Coffee, it's this, this, and this. But my husband says essential oils are the oils made for making French fries, donuts. That those are what essential oils are, and fried chicken. Anyway, I digress. So
Right.
we were talking about the amount of French fries one would need to eat and the amount of prunes one would need to eat to get enough acrylamide. So in the drying and roasting process, you take prune, you take the larger fruit, and then you dry it. And when you dry it, you're taking out water. The same thing occurs when you roast coffee, when you roast nuts, when you dry anything, you're taking out the water, which means you get a higher concentration of whatever is left in there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're eating things that have been dried or roasted, you're going to have more acrylamides.
Interesting.
But for example, in purity coffee, purity goes through great lengths to get the right balance between how much it's roasted and how much it's not roasted, like a medium roast rather than a dark, strong roast, because you want to balance what happens with acrylamide formation and what happens with the other chemical compounds.
Right.
Anyway, going back to California, so they then looked at all the research on acrylamide formation in coffee, and they came up with the fact the OEHHA proposed new regulations that would say you do not have to put cancer warning labels on coffee products because consuming acrylamide contains in coffee poses no significant cancer risk.
Right.
Period.
That's great. Great victory. Official ruling, which is now in place. And also, it was doing a disservice because of, as we talk about on the show, all the other anti-cancer compounds in coffee. But like you said, it's all about the quality. Interestingly enough, when I was looking into the numbers and some of the research, it looks like instant coffees and even coffee substitutes rated the highest when it comes to acrylamide. So even though they're pointing at coffee, when you look right into it, things like, for instance, 160 milliliter cup of roasted coffee only had 0.45 micrograms of acrylamide compared to 3.21 micrograms in coffee substitutes. So it's funny that they pointed it at coffee in general, but it's all about the quality you're drinking, right? I mean, just looking at this other list, it looks like, I don't want to point any fingers at brand names, but you know the ones, all the instant coffees, all the ones with the flavor crystals, all the freeze-dried ones. Those are the ones at the high end of this list. I don't think this is the cup that you just brewed at home, your Purity, your Bulletproof, your gourmet coffee du jour. It's not really on the radar, it doesn't seem.
No, not at all. And again, when we wrote our letters to California protesting this, it wasn't as much the acrylamides that we were pointing to. It was more all the health studies that show coffee consumption increases all life expectancy, coffee consumption decreases Parkinson's risk,
Right.
Coffee consumption decreases Alzheimer's risk. I mean, the overwhelming evidence that coffee is a medicinal herb and has significant benefits, more major benefits than any other herb or food out there, period, means that you can't just separate the concept of acrylamide, apply it across the board to
Right.
Everything that has acrylamide in it. So there are things in coffee which counteract the effect of any acrylamide that's in it.
Way beyond, yeah.
Yeah, and there are other things in coffee that boost all aspects of health so much that the idea of making coffee a carcinogenic is ridiculous.
Right. You're not pro-acrylamide here. You're saying you guys are doing a huge disservice, kind of nitpicking these things. And I think it's tough as a judge. I mean, this judge isn't a doctor. He's not a chemist. They don't quite understand. I mean, for heck's sake, arsenic is in rice, right? Arsenic's horrible for you. Are we going to put cancer labels on rice? I mean, it's tough when you start legislating things that break down to this, microscopic molecular science, right?
Absolutely.
Not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying it's tough. It's a tough putt for the judge.
It is. It is. And that's why I'm really glad that the Council for Education and Research on Toxins worked with California to come up with the suitability of whether or not coffee should be labeled as a carcinogen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that this is a step in the right direction for sure.
Yeah.
And to round it out here, this is kind of my job as a podcaster. A little bit more off topic, but what kind of time frame are these people running on? I mean, you take a look at the state of California, you take a look at the city of Los Angeles and what's going on with the typhus and the homeless issues, people languishing in the streets, and here you are spending hours legislating coffee legislature. You know what I mean? Don't you feel like this is a little bit of a slap in the face to the major problems that are going on in California?
Absolutely. But they have this law
in place
since I think 1986. They first put Proposition 65, and it was originally enacted, if memory serves me correctly, because California's drinking water was toxic with cancer-causing chemicals in it.
Oh, wow.
And so it started a mandate of what the list of all chemicals known to be toxins are. And on that warning list, there were 1,000 chemicals. This goes back, as I said, to 1965. And then they've kept that law on the books, and so they add things whenever the things are part of that law, should be as part of that law. And it was
right as they come up.
And it was activists against coffee that were trying to do a class action suit against Starbucks and against 7-Eleven, saying that they were serving carcinogens. And that's really, in my opinion, how this whole thing got started. And once it got in front of a judge, the judge looks at the list of 1,000 chemicals and says, yeah, I see acrylamide on there, so I guess that's what we have to do.
Where did the interests come from? Is this like Monster Energy drink backing? Were they backing these groups or what? You know what I mean? Like there has to be an interest behind here, right? This is America after all.
Yeah, you always follow the money, and that's why I felt that it was coming from a class action suit against Starbucks and 7-Eleven.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Yep, big energy drink, man. They're working behind the scenes. Big energy. Well, this is great, man. I'm glad that it got cleared up. I'm glad that the truth is now out. Hopefully the public remembers. Hopefully it resounds. You know what I mean? Do you have anything else to add here before we wrap up our little Prop 65 recap?
No, I don't think so, other than people should do their due diligence when it comes to science. That's why, I'm out, Dr. Coffee, always trying to talk about the real science behind coffee as a medicinal herb. And Jordan, on your podcast very, very soon, we're going to be offering the coffee book with all the recommendations in it and all the science in it.
Yes.
So it's at finishing touches right now.
Fantastic. Everybody keep an eye out for that. ibleedcoffee.com, everybody. That's Dr. Coffee's website. Check him out and make sure to stay tuned for lots of great episodes coming up shortly on this podcast. All right, everybody. This is Dr. Stephen Helschein, a.k.a. Dr. Coffee, and Jordan River signing off, saying we'll see you next time on the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast.